Welcome to episode 57 on the Live Blissed Out podcast. Did you know from neuroscience that you only have 6 to 10 seconds to stop yourself from losing your cool and flooding your bloodstream with chemicals and hormones that stay with you for up to 22 hours or until you have a sleep cycle? Hello, action takers. Welcome to Live Blissed Out, a podcast where I have inspirational and informational conversations with business owners and subject matter experts to help us get the scoop and the lowdown on a variety of topics. Tired of hesitating or making decisions without having the big picture? Want to be in the know? Then this is the place to go. I'm your host, Marissa Houston, helping achieve bliss through awareness and action. Thanks for joining me. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice. Joining me is Mike Gregory. Mike first learned about collaboration a few minutes after he was born when his twin brother Mark entered the world and he began to share the world with his other 4 siblings. Today, you will learn how to take advantage of the collaboration effect to enhance relationships, resources, and revenues. With a BS, MS, and MBA, Mike is an avid researcher with 11 books and over 35 published articles. He has over 25 years of management experience at all levels, working with neuroscientists. Mike has 2 little grandchildren he has the pleasure of seeing weekly and will share what he has learned and provide the tools needed to apply the collaboration effect in work, home, and life. Realizing that we all experience conflict in various situations, Mike will discuss how to overcome conflict with collaboration. There are techniques that can be used to minimize pain even when working with difficult people. Our focus in this episode is on active listening. To learn more, visit mikegreg.com. Do you have a lamp or lighting fixture that needs service? Mark Collins at Lamp Restorations is a dependable appliance repair expert. He has been repairing and restoring lamps and lighting fixtures in the Centennial, Colorado area for over 10 years. He offers quick and reliable service. All work is done on site out of his tiny solar-powered shed. Most work is completed within a few days, and special consideration can be given to critical rush lamp repairs. For hours, location, and customer testimonials, click the link in the show notes or visit lamprestorations.com. Mike, thanks for being here today. I really appreciate you spending time with us.
Oh, this is my pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your podcast.
Oh, this is going to be great. You and I talked about the fact that there are some common questions that people ask you about the particular subject matter we're going to be discussing. So I think it would just make sense to have those individuals share their questions with us and give you the opportunity then to answer it here on the show.
What is the collaboration effect, and how did this come about?
Well, that question came from Kathy Sullivan, and she's the president of 6 Degrees Studio. She's also my webmaster, and I collaborate with her with the work that we have on my webpage at mikegreg.com. Now, the collaboration effect, it's actually pretty simple. I've been working with neuroscientists now for 7 years, and I've been involved with over 2,500 mediations and negotiations over the course of my career. I'm a mediator with the Minnesota Supreme Court, and I've been involved with mediations and negotiations with issues up to $1 billion with Fortune 100 companies to small businesses, and I volunteer in arenas such as housing court, conciliation court, neighborhood disputes, public housing, and in situations with gangs and after racially charged police shootings. I do that as all volunteer work, but I have a passion for this. But the collaboration effect is actually pretty simple. Collaboration is a word that's been around a long time, but neuroscience is growing exponentially. With neuroscience taking such an active role, something has evolved called the collaboration effect. And the collaboration effect is all about connecting relationships, listening actively, educating judiciously, so that you can build bridges to negotiate closure. Now, the way I got there in part is I took a mediation course at Hamlin Law School back in 1999. At that time, I was an assistant director, had about 1,200 employees. When I came back, my director asked me to go ahead and mediate a dispute between 2 division chiefs relative to budget, and they were at each other's throats. The director didn't think it was going to work, but it did. And after it did, he gave me other assignments related to management and equal employment opportunity and labor management relations. And then I got sent off on a detail for about 4.5 months to a different part of the country. And when I got there, they had some very significant issues. We had about 1,200 employees, and we had 30 unfair labor practices, EEO complaints, and grievances. That location also had about 1,200 employees, but instead of 30, they had 300 grievances, unfair labor practices, and other issues, EEO complaints. Well, after being there a week, it was obvious there were some major problems. So as the assistant director, I went to the director and I said, I would like to propose we initiate a process related to conflict resolution with what I've learned on mediation. And he said, okay, keep me brief weekly, but you also have to work with labor relations, the Equal Employment Opportunity Officer, top line management, mid-level management, frontline managers, with the union, and have to keep us all appraised, and we all have to be on board through the entire time. Well, we set up a process. We worked the process. At the end of 4.5 months, we resolved 90% of those. So we went from 300 down to 30. When my time was up on that detail, there's always a coffee. And the coffee generally is for an hour, and maybe 20 people show up. 10 show up because you've made some friends in the course of 4 or 5 months, and 10 show up because they like to be seen by the director. Well, in this case, it was a major change from that. It lasted 6 hours and 400 people showed up, and that changed my life. From there, I said, this element of mediation, conflict resolution, and the impact we had on these employees and on me, I'm going to carry this forward. Over time, this has grown into the collaboration effect. And the collaboration effect is all about connecting relationships. And that means really connecting. It means finding ways that when you're involved with someone else, how can we really connect? What do we have in common? And in today's world, and I'm involved in mediations and negotiations, that means I can research them on the internet. I can look at all sorts of different sources. I can look at LinkedIn and Twitter and Reddit, all sorts of different things. And then I also can network within my own network. I have a newsletter that goes up to some 6,000 people each month, and I have some 300 connections on LinkedIn. So there are different connections that I have. I can reach out to people, and you can too. Who can you reach out to with respect to whoever it is you're going to be interacting with? And find ways in which you and they can connect with each other. And it can be everything from where do they go to school, where do they grow up, do they have any pets, are they married or single, do they drink coffee? If they do, what kind of coffee do they like? But find ways to try to connect.
So in other words, you're saying look for something in common that you may share.
You want to really connect so there'll be something they have a passion about. So when you start to think you're connecting, then we're going to focus on listening actively. And that means focus on being interested in them, not on being interesting. Ask open-ended questions, paraphrase, summarize, empathize with them. You want to listen like you've never listened before. And when someone's been listened to, they're far more apt to listen to you. So a whole chapter in my latest book called The Collaboration Effect on listening actively. And we've never really been taught that. We watched some debates with the presidents, with the candidates for president, and those folks did not listen at all. They were very much in your face type of an attitude back and forth. And instead of a debate, if we really want to collaborate with others, we need to listen to them. And then once someone's been listened to, they're more apt to listen to you. And at that point, you have the chance to educate judiciously. Now, for expert witnesses, and I ran an expert witness group for 7 years with 21 experts. We had 10 to 12 cases docketed at any one given time and covered about a third of the U.S. I learned that for the trier of fact, which might be a judge, it could be a jury, we need to educate them the way they want to be educated. We need to slow down. We need to put it in terms that they understand. We want to make a host of points and focus on only the most important points so they can ask questions. In fact, there's a book that's written by John Baker on getting what you want, and he suggests 3 things. Know what you want, ask for it, and provide 3 reasons why it's beneficial for them. So when you're educating judiciously, you're also just there to provide information and hopefully make them curious. They'll want to ask you more questions. And if you're doing that, you really are educating so that you can move towards building bridges to negotiate closure. When you build bridges to negotiate closure, you're working with the other party through this process of negotiation. And you want to be asking questions to, again, fully understand and ask questions that they can say yes to. Turns out every time we say yes to a question, we really mean yes, we produce certain chemicals and hormones in the brain which make us more receptive to the other party. So if there's some obvious things, you can get them to say, whatever those questions might be, don't focus on beliefs, focus on values. So I was not involved with this, but a friend of mine was in mediating with the legislature and the governor. I'm here in Minnesota. We have a Democratic governor and we have a Democratic House and a Republican Senate. And when those three got together to talk about abortion, you know where everybody stood. But they brought in this mediator, and he focused on values. And he focused with the leadership of these three groups and said, what are our values? And they came up with values that we don't want unwanted pregnancies. And we do want children to be in a home, that is, where they're loved, where they have food, where they have medical care, where they feel safe. That's what we want. So what can we do to do those things? And they came up with a bipartisan way to address the issues of what we can do to make life better for our children and what we can do to prevent unwanted pregnancies.
This reminds me a lot of Stephen Covey's begin with the end in mind. Like, what is the end objective that you have in common? And then work your way towards that by discussing what are some things that'll help get you there. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
And also what you were talking about in terms of listening, when we have a conversation with somebody else, yes, we hear what they're saying, but the other person, if, for example, they're saying something that you may not agree with, the tendency is for us to just jump right in and talk about what we think. And then what happens is the other person will often say, did you just hear what I said? You're not hearing me. And that's because we don't tend to try to understand exactly where they're coming from, or at least acknowledge what they're saying by perhaps repeating what they said and say something to the effect of, so you're saying X, Y, Z, is that right? Am I getting it right? Am I understanding you correctly? Because now you've just repeated what they said, so they know for a fact that you at least heard them, because we're not always going to agree about different things. So it's very important that if you're not going to agree, at the very least, you need to acknowledge what the person said and try to understand it first.
Absolutely. Asking open-ended questions like, what would you like to have happen? Or what worries or concerns do you have? Or what would it take for you to feel satisfied? And as you proceed towards the end of those kind of open-ended questions, asking something like, what have we not covered that you want me to know? What can I do to help you? Are there other concerns or problems that we haven't talked about that you wanted to share with me? So by asking open-ended questions and listening like this, the other person is developing trust with you. And I use an acronym for trust. That is SOAR, S-O-A-R, being straightforward, open, accepting, and responsible. And straightforward means operating with honesty and integrity. And open means being transparent. Share what you can, legally, morally, ethically, and be open to the other party. When you are open and transparent, the other party can feel that and will likely return with being open and honest with you. Be accepting of others. And that means avoid the two stinky twins of BO and BS. BO is blaming others, and BS is blaming self, what I coulda, woulda, should have done. Don't go there, and don't blame other people. Stay above the line, stay positive. And be responsible. You know, if a plumber says I can get this done in a day and it takes half a day, you're happy. Plumber says I can get this done in a day and it takes 2 days, you're not very happy. So under-promise and over-deliver with the other party. Leave yourself room for a float or what changes might shock to your system or shock to your schedule. So be straightforward, open, accepting, and responsible to build trust.
These skills that you're teaching us today are things that we can apply in our lives, particularly in today's times, right? We need it more than ever. We've always needed it because communication between people and being able to collaborate with somebody else and respect each other's a skill set that we can all use to better ourselves and how we work with others. But primarily in today's world, I feel like it's even more applicable in all facets of our lives. Let's talk about the next question.
Can you share some stories about active listening based on real-world conflicts and something you learned when you were a relatively young manager?
Sure. That's from Melissa Gregg. Melissa Gregg is the managing partner at Bridge Valuation Partners. She's a business valuer, again, a friend of mine. But when I was a relatively young manager, I had managed a group, and the group was made up of one woman and all the rest men. I don't remember, there were 9 or 10 employees there. And then I was assigned to a new group, and the new group was made up of entirely women and 1 man. I think there were 7 women and 1 man, if I recall properly. And about 2 weeks into that job, I knew something was wrong, and I didn't know what it was. And one of the employees that I felt I could have a conversation with and ask a difficult question, her name was Gail. And I said, Gail, something's not quite right. I'm wondering, could you help me with this? And Gail lowered her head, and her face got kind of red. And then She paused and looked up at me and she said, Mike, there are times when we come into your office, all we want you to do is just listen. And I said, okay, I'm a guy. I'm thick. I don't get it. I don't know when you come in and ask a question when you want me to listen and when you come in and you want me to help you provide a solution. So I'm going to bring this up in a group meeting. So I brought it up in a group meeting with the entire group. And I think they kind of felt sorry for me here a little bit. But they said, okay, we'll develop a system with you, Mike. When we come to your office and we knock on the side of the door frame, it's open, and we say a code word, and that code word was blue. When we say blue, that means we're coming in your office, and all we want you to do is listen. So I'm sitting at my desk. I'm working on my keyboard. Somebody knocks on the door. I look up over to the side, and there they are. And this person would say blue. And I had a chair with rollers, and I would push it away from my desk. And I had a little round table that had 2 chairs at it. And my chair could roll in so there could be me and up to 2 more people at this little round table. And I grabbed a pad of paper and a pen. And when the person came in, all I did was listen actively. So I paraphrased, I summarized, I asked open-ended questions, I empathized, and I didn't provide any solutions. If they ever said, well, Mike, what do you think? I'm happy to go there. But what I found out is 9 times out of 10, they solved the problem. And that was really cool. When they solved the problem, they solved it. And less people started coming to me as a manager. And I thought as a new manager, I had to have all the answers. And I learned I don't have to have all the answers. I need to help them. So for me, that was an aha moment. And that aha moment propelled me in my career from frontline manager to mid-level manager to upper-level management and executive. Kept that whole system in line of let's listen actively to what people have to say. I was so excited about this. I came home and I told my wife. You know what my wife said? She said, Mike, you can do that at home too.
Exactly right. And the thing about this whole process is that when we're approaching somebody and bringing up a problem, the reason why this works so well is because we just need to verbalize it. It's almost like you need to think about it, but talk at the same time in order for these ideas to flow in your head. It's not necessarily, oh, I have to go in here to get them to tell me what to do, but it's more, I just need to let it out. I need somebody to listen to me. And then all of a sudden the light bulb goes off. And then, like you said, if you're very specific about your objective, so if you get to the point where you say, okay, here's the part where I really do need advice, what would you do in this situation? Then you know to jump in. But if they're saying, I just need you to listen, then that's exactly what you can give them that will help get their brain flowing and get the ideas out in the open so that they can feel comfortable with whatever decision they end up taking, right?
Yes. And on the home front, and picking up on this too, I have a home office. I work out of my home. My wife works in a company. And when she comes home from work, she's been stressed. I needed to learn, give her time to decompress. That could be 20 minutes or half an hour. And I might want to say, hey, how was your day? How'd you do today? Well, the best thing I could do is just wait. And then she'd come to my office, and I keep the door shut to my office, kind of like that's when I'm in here working. And my wife would come and knock at the door. We'd joke with each other. She'd come on in, and I'd ask her about her day, or she'd ask me about mine. And then we would just hug each other for maybe a few seconds or even longer, and how good that felt. And then I could listen to what happened with her that day, or she might just want to ask me what happened with me in my day. But we would listen to each other and ask questions about each other instead of both of us wanting to say, hey, I want to tell you what happened with me today. Who has more of a, I need to talk, and the other person will be in the mode of, I'm just here to listen. That's worked very well for us. And I think that can work for a lot of other people that way too.
I think we can all use some tips on how to do it better, maximizing our ability to communicate. I like what you said, going back to, we either blame somebody else or we blame ourselves, but why don't we just look at, okay, this is not working. How can we fix it? How can we improve? That's really where it starts. I wanted to jump into the third popular question that you get asked.
How does the collaboration effect set one up for successful closure of a negotiation?
Yep, and that's from Paul Hammond. Paul Hammond is the president of RC Reports, stands for Reasonable Compensation Reports. I've been responsible for doing a lot of work in this field. I'm known for being an expert in this area related to my business valuation background. The reason he brought up this question is he knows an example of a case that I was involved with. And I got a call from some attorney, and the attorney was a lead attorney with 5 other attorneys. And they had a very significant issue with the IRS. You think about the IRS, you're already going like, oh, this isn't good. They had a business valuation that was done, and this was used on a tax return for an estate tax return. And the IRS had said, you owe a lot more money. In this particular case, they said you owe about $1.6 million in tax in addition on this estate. And it had to do with a particular issue. And this attorney called me up and said, here's what we're going to do. And we're going to tell and I'll just call it the agent, who happens to be an attorney. We're going to tell the agent why they're wrong, and we're going to take on this issue, and then it's unagreed, and we're going to go to appeals, and we'll get it settled in appeals. It'll take us about 2 years. So how can you help me? And I said, actually, if you're going to do that, I can't help you. So I would take a very different approach. What would you do? And I said, well, I would learn everything I can about this agent. This is the connecting relationships. I'd go online. I'd network at the law firm. I'd network with other attorneys. Then I'd call up that attorney from the IRS, that agent, and I'd say, we have to work together on this issue. In order to do that, I'm wondering if we can build some trust with one another. I'm wondering if you could share some things about you. I could share some things about me. And from that, we could go forward with this issue. So he worked with me, and we developed a series of questions. And then from that, he contacted that attorney. And from there, he called me on back and said, okay, here's all the things that I learned about this guy. And the guy was receptive and willing to work with me. But now how are we going to talk about this issue? And I said, well, we're going to set you up for success by we're going to go to a neutral location in this person's office. The client happened to be in Boston, had a nice law firm looking out Boston Harbor. And I said, you're not going to come in with 6 attorneys. You're going to come in with one other attorney. And we look for food, water, and shelter. So we're going to address those things. You found out the person is a Starbucks person, a morning person, likes to run, is single, has a couple of dogs. Given those things, let's set it up for a morning meeting. Let's have good foods that are associated with negotiation. And from a book called The Brain-Friendly Workplace, written by Erica Garm, she's a PhD, a neuroscientist, foods like cut up fruit, blueberries, which are good antioxidants, having some peanut butter, having some dark chocolate. So we had some carrot sticks and celery sticks there too. These are all kind of healthy things. We don't want breads, which are going to give us a spike in terms of what happens in our brains with you go up high and come back low. These things are going to focus on making our brains more receptive to others. And when you can smell the dark chocolate or smell the peanut butter, that's addressing those senses too. So we're going to have those things over on a counter. We're going to have a little round table. You're going to be there with that one other person whose primary role is to take notes. And we're going to set it up for, how long do you think this meeting should last? I asked. And the attorney said about an hour. So I said, let's make it for double that, 2 hours, which will allow us to take bathroom breaks or other breaks and reduce the pressure on time. So we set it up for 2 hours. We broke it up into 4 segments. The first one was the connecting relationships. So when this person comes in, although the new person knows all about the person coming from the IRS, that IRS agent, it's as if they don't. So they can ask all kinds of questions and work on connecting with this person. That was done for about 15 minutes to half hour. Food was offered. The person was a Starbucks person. We had Starbucks coffee and water there. The person took some coffee, didn't take anything to eat, but we did, and had those on little plates at this little table, taking in all the senses of the food, the smell and the sight, etc. And then moved into the second element, and that was listening actively. On a percentage item on this one issue, the IRS was at 10%, and the taxpayer had an appraisal that said it was somewhere between 30 and 35%, and they put 30% on their return. So with that being the case, they asked the IRS all kinds of questions about how did they get to that 10%. They wanted to know everything that went into it, never judging it, but really trying to understand. And then they were, again, paraphrasing, summarizing, asking open-ended questions, empathizing with the service, and really understanding where they came up with the 10%. Again, they were focused on being interested in what that person did to come up with 10%. And then we moved into the third part here, and that was an educating judiciously. Now, working on this particular issue, a lot of work went into how they came up with the 30 to 35%. And additional research found out that the IRS had a job aid on this. And with that job aid, there were a number of other points that could have been made compared to what the original appraisal had for the taxpayer's appraisal. There were 8 additional facts that are indeed facts with the case that were not brought up in that appraisal. And those tended to increase this number. And each time they brought up this fact, and they pointed out it was in the job aid, and they said, and would you think this would tend to increase that percentage? And each time the agent said, yes. That's the chemicals and hormones being made in the brain each time they said yes. So after we got through connecting relationships, listening actively, and educating judiciously, a key question was asked. And it was this. You were originally at 10%. Our appraiser was at 30 to 35%. But we pointed out here are 8 things as to why that number could be higher. And you concurred that that would tend to make the number higher. So we actually think the number today should be 35%. Before we go on any further, what do you think? And that IRS agent responded and said, could you live with 34%? To which the taxpayer said, yes, we can live with that. And with the taxpayer saying yes to that, That meant instead of paying $1.6 million, they got a $400,000 refund out of this thing. So that attorney for the taxpayer, they were very excited. They told me about it, and they said, you got to come out and talk to our law firm. So I did. They have about 200 attorneys, and I spoke to about half. And then they called me up because some of those attorneys had gone to Harvard Law School. And they said, we've got this club in Boston called the Harvard Club. And they invited me out to the Harvard Club. And that story that I told you, I went into a lot more detail, made it a 2-hour presentation with a number of elements from neuroscience. And they brought me back about 2 years later to do it again. So I've been out to the Harvard Club twice to tell that story in much greater detail to help others understand how you can use this. It wasn't done to manipulate anybody. It was authentic in nature. It was honest with what we did, not trying to spin something some way. I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. I'm just running through how our brains work and how we can work with others, even with the IRS, even in difficult situations, on applying this technique. Now, it doesn't just happen. It takes practice, it takes patience, but that's what the collaboration effect is. And that's an example of how you can set something up for closure in a negotiation. Now, they don't always work this well, but that one did. And that's why I use that particular success story. That's how you bring this into a negotiation and set it up for a positive negotiation.
Everything takes practice. So you have the concept, and that's what we're sharing with our listeners today, giving them some ideas and helping them understand how powerful this process can be and how they can utilize it. But there's going to have to be some action taken, right? Which is really what our show is about. We want to start with awareness and then encourage people to take baby steps and start doing things that are going to help them reach whatever goals they have for themselves. How can they learn more about the collaboration effect and about you and the people that you serve?
Now, my name is Michael Gregory, so I've just shortened that to Mike Greg, MikeGreg.com. And at that website are a number of other resources that are there that they can tap on. I blog weekly, and if you click on the blog site, on the left side of that are a host of different topics. So just for example, working with difficult people, depending on what the issue might be. This could be with your boss, with an employee, with a peer. It could be with a vendor, with a customer, with some other stakeholder. It could be with just some person that you have a hard time working with. It could be outside of work. So under just, for example, working with difficult people, there are over 50 different blogs that have been written on different topics of how to work with difficult people. So I've attempted to pull together resources. I've been doing this now for 9 years. So we've got a fair number of blogs on a weekly basis. They're organized, as I indicated. And I'm always available. I make professional presentations as a keynote speaker on how do we overcome your conflicts. That's my keynote right now. My new book, The Collaboration Effect. The subtitle for that is Overcoming Your Conflicts. I have a perspective. I'm really trying to make the world a better place. And with that in mind, if I can help somebody, give me a call. The call is free. I have a number of complimentary sources that are associated with my website too. If I can be of any assistance to anybody, or you know someone who's looking for a dynamic, interactive, entertaining, fun speaker, that's what I do. I also provide specific workshops based on 4 of my books. The Collaboration Effect is new. I also have written Peaceful Resolutions, The Servant Manager. I've collaborated with 2 other books recently. One of them was a #1 bestseller for a new book on all of Amazon's categories back in the end of July. And that book is entitled One Habit for a Thriving Home Office. There are a series of One Habit books. I'm just one of the contributors to the book. Another one that I contributed to is 100 Habits from the Happiest Achievers on the Planet. And I'm honored they even let me be in that book. A lot of the folks in that book you'll recognize, but many of them you won't. I'm one of those you don't recognize. But I am a very happy guy. And I look at this as I've looked at the course on happiness from Yale. And that course has 5 points to it. Gratitude for at least 5 minutes a day. And I do that in the morning when I start my day. I start by thinking about my wife as I'm brushing my teeth. Label negative feelings. So put that in a Word document or in a journal. Know that you made decisions good enough at the end of each day. You did the best you could. What can you learn going forward? Appropriate touch. I gave an example of the hug with my wife, or it can be a fist bump or a handshake. It's tough right now with COVID-19. And then at least 10 minutes a day for mindfulness, and that can be meditation, prayer, or reflection. This also stems from work, and a great source is the Greater Good Science Center at the University of California, Berkeley. It's available free. You can sign up, and they send out a newsletter. You can search on their website. So, for example, I might put in neuroscience and toddlers, or neuroscience and preschoolers. I'm a grandfather here. Or you could go ahead and say neuroscience and middle schoolers, or teenagers, or young adults, or Alzheimer's or dementia. And in the area of neuroscience, it's growing so exponentially. The best place to find information today is on a source like the Greater Good Science Center. And they also have the same perspective on these 5 points I brought up on the happiness course that's at Yale. With gratitude, label negative feelings, make the decision good enough, appropriate touch, and they have meditation, or let's say mindfulness. Those 5 things have been around for over 10 years. It's been at Yale as a course now for, I think, 2 years, maybe 3, something like that. And over half the students at Yale take the class. It's a 1-credit course. But Yale's offering this because they said, these are our leaders of tomorrow. And if they know this, they can bring these to their places of employment and make this part of the culture so that folks can be happier at work. They can have more balance in their lives by addressing these types of things. After they go through my presentations, the feedback I have is their people are more focused on the tasks at hand. They have more control in navigating difficult decisions, and they have more peace in the professional and personal relationships. And that's what we're about. We're trying to make the world a better place.
This is stuff we all can use. So thank you, Mike, for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure.
That's all for this episode of Live Blissed Out. Thanks for listening, and thanks to Mike Gregory for being my guest. If you have a question or comment for a future episode, all you have to do is go to speakpipe.com/LBOVM or click the link in the show notes to leave a brief audio message. If you find value in our show, please visit liveblessedout.com to reach out, subscribe, and share on social media. This show is made possible through listeners like you. Thank you. So long for now, and remember to keep moving forward.